March 2014. An airliner with 239 passengers and crew on board vanishes without trace.
A year later, it is even more certain that it was a unique event, and I mean unique in the dictionary definition. We've never seen it before since flying was invented.
A year on, and the agony for the families of those on board still goes on.
That there are no remains at the moment, there can be no burials, there can be no funerals.
12 months later, the world is still waiting for answers. Could MH370 change flying forever?
Disappearance of Flight 370 is not a game changer, it's a world changer.
Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 disappeared on Saturday, March the 8th, 2014. For the relatives, a year of heartbreak and agony. They were told early on the aircraft had been lost at sea, with no survivors.
Flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
Since last June, the search has focused on an area just over 1,000 miles off the west coast of Australia.
Well, I believe that they should continue searching until they have found the wreckage and the black boxes, because the families deserve nothing less.
We want to get the black boxes, and just like they yielded up all the secrets of Air France 447, we want these to yield up all the secrets of MH370.
So I would certainly expect them to continue searching for at least another year, albeit in very difficult conditions. But they owe that to all the families of MH370 and also trying to improve air safety.
Despite refining the search, absolutely nothing has turned up. So a year on, can we attempt to draw any final conclusions on what really happened?
It's fair to describe it as probably the biggest and most serious aviation mystery since the start of aviation over 100 years ago. No evidence, no explanations, and no truth.
You would have thought that something would have been floating on the surface of the sea and that we would have found something. All of us who travel by air, we just don't like this, and neither should we.
It all begins after midnight on March 8th, 2014. Flight MH370 leaves Kuala Lumpur for Beijing. The crew settle down for the 6-hour journey as passengers doze, getting what rest they can. An hour later, as it leaves Malaysian airspace, the co-pilot reportedly tells air traffic control, "All right, good night." Allegedly, these are the last words anyone heard from the people on board. Minutes later, it vanished. Beijing, 6:30 a.m. Relatives and friends gather to meet the flight. They're told only that the plane has been delayed. But it fast becomes apparent that this is much more serious. People are taken to a city hotel, but they still don't know what's going on.
Nobody has told us anything. Nobody talks to us except volunteers and hotel staff.
Finally, their worst fears confirmed.
Malaysia Airlines confirmed that this flight, MH370, lost contact with Subang Air Traffic Control, the manufacturer.
Officials have no idea where the plane is.
We do not have any findings at this point in time. The search and rescue team has started since morning. Everyone has put in an effort, and yet we have not found any wreckage, no wreckage whatsoever.
As Malaysia wakes up to the news, people gather in Kuala Lumpur Airport, desperate to learn the fate of friend and family. but nothing is forthcoming. This we do know. The plane took off last year from Kuala Lumpur at 20 past midnight local time on Saturday, March 8th, due to arrive in Beijing just over 6 hours later. At 1:19, the final alleged good night transmission to Malaysian air traffic control. Less than 10 minutes later, it disappears from air traffic control radar. As the search intensifies, an international effort swings into action. A flotilla of vessels scour the ocean. Planes also search for the 300-ton aeroplane. The US 7th Fleet joins in, aware time is running out.
As every hour goes by, the search area gets bigger and bigger. A person can survive in the water for at least 72 hours due to sheer willpower. After that, the chances of survival get less and less, and that's what we're concerned with right now.
Despite their best efforts, nothing. There are reports an oil rig worker sees a fireball in the sky near where the flight disappeared. The Malaysian Air Force pick up an unidentified radar signal. An oil slick is spotted off the coast of Vietnam. Analysis later proves it came from a ship. Then a promising breakthrough. What appears to be a door floating in the water. It turns out to be a cable reel. For the relatives of those on board, the agony intensifies.
We have communicated to the family members that after more than 30 hours without any contact with the aircraft, we believe that the family members should prepare themselves for the work.
And as each day goes by, without knowing what happened to their loved ones, the sense of loss only gets worse.
After 7 days of not locating the aircraft, it's unprecedented in civil aviation history.
Then, a startling announcement. Investigators are certain whatever happened to the plane was not an accident.
These movements are consistent with deliberate action by someone on the plane.
Shortly after MH370 loses contact, Malaysian military radar observes it taking a sharp left turn to the west, later confirmed by the Thai military. Even more startling is the news a satellite was still picking up signals from the aircraft a full 7 hours after it went missing.
The plane's last communication with the satellite was in one of two possible corridors.
They give no precise location, but indicate two key areas. One, a northern corridor stretches from the Kazakhstan-Turkmenistan border to northern Thailand. The second southern corridor is a vast swathe of the Indian Ocean.
The Malaysian authorities have refocused their investigation into the crew and passengers on board. Despite media reports that the plane was hijacked, I wish to be very clear. We are still investigating all possibilities as to what caused MH370 to deviate from its original flight path.
One suspicion is the plane has been commandeered or hijacked.
If we go back to sort of the Cuban hijack style, the Arab gunmen hijacks of the 70s, we kind of think that's a phase of terrorism that's behind us, but it's never really gone away. This could be a change in tactic from the terrorists. It could be a classic hijack. We just don't know.
Another possibility is pilot suicide.
There'll be psychological profiling of the crew carried out by experts looking into their background. They'll be looking at their political, family, social, financial, religious, every area of their lives will be looked at.
An emergency could have forced the crew to head for the nearest airport.
A catastrophic failure would be something that none of the flight deck had experienced before. I think the flight crew probably made a valiant effort to get the aeroplane onto a new course to safety.
Whatever happened, attention at this point is on the crew. Were they heroes or villains? The captain was a grandfather who loved his job. His co-pilot was about to propose to his girlfriend, also a pilot. The search covers 3 million square miles, a vast expanse in which to try and find anything, even when it's the size of an airliner. The Boeing 777 is the world's largest twin-engine passenger jet. It entered commercial service in 1995. Mechanical failure is unlikely.
The 777 has a fantastic safety record. It's had one fatal accident in 20 years of operation, so it was surprising to hear that there'd been an event. I was not surprised that there were no initial reports that confirmed what that event was, but as the days went on, then that does become surprising that there's nothing at all.
When flight MH370 takes off, the weather's good. The sky's clear, so an act of God is highly unlikely. So what could possibly have happened to the passenger jet?
There are at least 50 theories out there. Many of those theories are by Boeing pilots and experts and accident investigators. But again, until you've got the evidence, it's only a theory.
It may be confusing to see so many theories evolving about the loss of an aircraft, and it's a very technical issue. But all of those theories are actually very useful. And it's not conspiracy theory, but all of the side theories might put light on an unusual situation. So the forensic scientists who've got very open minds have to incorporate everything that's sort of coming out.
As day 2 comes to an end, the world, and especially the families, need information. A possible lead. The authorities home in on 2 suspicious passengers. Could these CCTV images be the key to unlocking the fate of MH370? In the aftermath of the disappearance of flight MH370, people fear the worst.
A hijack in this day and age really is of no surprise to the aviation security community.
I think no one can rule out foul play at this stage, and that could be anything from a terrorist attack across to an act of sabotage.
And new technology brings new threats.
Until it's disproven, this is potentially a cyber hijack.
Day 2, and the Malaysian and Vietnamese search effort focuses on an area 20 miles around the last known position of the plane. Investigators remain baffled how a 300-ton passenger plane could disappear so suddenly with no distress call from the pilot.
There is nothing in aviation's history that is quite like this. We have no answers, so we are completely in the dark.
One possible explanation is the plane has been brought down by a terrorist bomb, similar to the one that destroyed Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie in 1988, killing 270 people. As in the case of MH370, there was no distress call, and the plane disappeared from radar screens instantaneously.
There's a lot of rumour and speculation, and indeed you can see that some things come out and then they're denied and then they come out again. It takes time for the whole team to process things. They want to give out facts. You have Kuala Lumpur, which is several hours ahead of London time. There's a British accident investigator working on this in relation to the engines. You have Boeing based in Seattle. So anything may well take 24 hours to verify, just in the way that the information goes around the world in a global manner. So there's obviously a process to release the information.
One striking new piece of information was that two passengers were traveling under assumed identities.
We have the CCTV's recording of those passengers from check-in right to the departure point.
Pouria Norma Hamadi and Syed Mohammed Reza Delavar were photographed boarding the flight using stolen passports. And examination of radar records suggests the plane might have unexpectedly changed course.
There is a possibility that this aircraft made a turn back, but we are not sure whether it is the same aircraft.
If this is true, who changed the plane's course and why? Having tracked down the genuine passport holders, the police reveal their two suspects are Iranian. Could they be linked to terrorism in the Middle East? Australian TV broadcasts an interview highlighting the issue of flight safety. A young South African woman claims that in 2011, she spent an entire flight in the cockpit of a plane with MH370's co-pilot Fareeq Abdul Hamid, totally at odds with aircraft security. Passengers have been banned from cockpits since the 9/11 attack, an obvious measure to stop the terrorists taking over planes.
I think it's highly likely a hijack took place. And again, there's four options for the hijack. One is a hijack of the aircraft through a crew member. The second option is a hijack coming from a passenger. A third option, which is a fairly unusual one, would be a stowaway. Then, of course, the fourth option is an electronic takeover of the aircraft from a ground-based station.
But then a surprise announcement. The Malaysian police declare one of the men was seeking asylum in Europe.
We believe that he is not likely to be a member of any terrorist group. And we believe that he is trying to migrate to Germany.
In the absence of hard facts, new theories emerge. From the plane being accidentally shot down by the military to cyber terrorism.
The cyber attack would be a highly sophisticated attack, which at the moment would seem the most unlikely, but that's only because we haven't seen it before. The day before 9/11, we never would have imagined that an aircraft would have been used effectively as a cruise missile to attack New York and Washington. But of course that happened. So that possibility cannot be ruled out, and nor can the possibility of one of the crew members, for whatever reason, taking over the aircraft.
According to this theory, the plane's main computer network could be accessed and compromised via a mobile phone app or a USB connection in the flight entertainment system.
This is potentially a cyber hijack where the use of a computer to actually simulate the pilot's activities has taken that plane off course and actually controlled every action of that plane, and potentially may have lost the plane or could have landed the plane. A cyber hijack really is a new form of warfare, and it's taking us into cyberspace where actually all forms of warfare are now concentrating on.
Day 6. And a report from the Wall Street Journal reveals startling new evidence.
The Journal is exclusively reporting that U.S. investigators believe missing flight Malaysian Airlines 370 flew for an additional 4 hours after losing contact.
They claim to have information that the plane had flown on after it disappeared from the radar.
Several hours ago, we reported that the Malaysian 777 appears to have flown on for an additional 4 hours after it was last seen by officials. And that was determined through a continual monitoring of the engines that happened even after the transponder stopped broadcasting for whatever reason in the early hours of Saturday morning over the Gulf of Thailand.
This new information raises perplexing questions. If the plane continued flying, who switched off the radar transponders? And where is the plane now? Malaysian authorities are swift to respond.
The data. As far as Rolls-Royce and Boeing are concerned, those reports are inaccurate.
The Wall Street Journal retracts its report, saying they had made an error and issues a correction. The information did not come from the engines, but from the plane's satellite communication link, a system designed to automatically transmit the status of the onboard systems.
It was a non-specific satellite signal. They know it came from the aeroplane, but it wasn't like a transponder response which gave a whole load of identification. They just happened to know that it was that aircraft, but there was no information in this ping. It was just a ping.
Later that day, the White House announces that the search may need to be extended to the Indian Ocean. It adds credibility to the theory that the plane continued flying after it disappeared. If the theory is true, the plane could have flown for an additional distance of 2,200 miles. As the search area expands to an area of almost 3 million square miles, investigators turn their attention to the plane itself. If mechanical failure is responsible, it would not be the first time. In the 7 days since Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 mysteriously disappeared in mid-air, planes and ships scour the ocean, but find nothing. While desperate relatives wait for any news of their loved ones. As the likelihood of an act of terrorism appears to lessen, the focus of the investigators turns to mechanical failure. If the plane did turn back, this could be the reason why. But on the surface of it, this doesn't seem likely.
The safety record of the 777 for this generation of aeroplane is superb. It's an extremely robust aeroplane. It handles exceptionally well, and it has a lot of inbuilt features that prevent the flight crew from abusing the aeroplane in a way that some of them may carelessly do.
However, mechanical failure, even on new planes like this, is not unheard of.
It's quite difficult to make 300 tons of metal disappear without trace, but it has happened before. If you look at 20 years of airline disasters and accidents, more often than not, it is actually an operational or a mechanical problem with the aircraft.
In June 2009, Air France 447 and Airbus A330 disappeared over the Atlantic.
That aircraft had 228 people on board, and it was over the South Atlantic going to Paris at 36,000 feet, and it just simply vanished. And it took some time, about a week, for some of the wreckage to be spotted on the surface.
A thorough investigation found the plane crashed because of ice forming in the tubes that measure the airspeed. This caused the autopilot to disconnect, and a sudden reduction in lift which the pilots were unable to correct. In this case, they failed to respond to mechanical failure as they should. Could the same have happened with flight MH370?
There are a lot of comparisons that can be made with the Air France 447 accident. The circumstances, you can make comparisons, but that doesn't necessarily mean the cause is going to turn out to be the same. The number of possibilities for what can go wrong with an aeroplane are so many, we're in the realms of hundreds. Most of them are incredibly improbable. At the moment, when that aircraft went missing, we had no indication of any malfunction whatsoever.
I think the starting point is, in accidents like this, it is usually a chain of causes. The Boeing 777 has had some problems in the past. You may remember the British Airways Flight 38 Boeing 777 that crash landed at Heathrow in 2008. That was due to problems with the fuel system and the fuel freezing. After that, the fuel system was redesigned in part, and so hopefully that is no longer a problem.
Mayday, mayday. Aircraft accident, aircraft accident.
But it certainly was a problem back in 2008. Both engines on the plane failed.
The position is the threshold, runway 27 left. The aircraft type is a 777. The actual problem is crash. The aircraft has crashed.
Paul Stafford, a former lecturer at Kingston University in Surrey, was on that plane.
The oxygen mass fell from the roof of the aircraft, and we seemed to be skidding for an eternity, bumping and bashing around. I smashed my head in the front of the seat. I hit my knee on the seat. I'd broken my body in half. My chest was hurting. We eventually stopped, and it was completely quiet. I looked to my left, and the undercarriage had come through the wing. And at that point, the captain did say, "Evacuate, evacuate." And that's the first time, the first moment I realised how serious it had been. It was terrible.
The BA flight had suffered total engine failure. But even if this had happened to the missing Malaysian plane, at 30,000 feet it would have been able to glide for about 20 minutes, allowing plenty of time for the pilot to make an emergency call. Day 8 of the mystery of the disappearing plane. A press conference is called in Kuala Lumpur. Now the Malaysian Prime Minister, Najib Razak, makes a dramatic announcement.
The Royal Malaysian Air Force primary radar data showed that an aircraft which was believed but not confirmed to be MH370 did indeed turn back.
So for the first time, the Malaysian authorities formally announced the plane does seem to have diverted from its planned route over the Gulf of Thailand and headed west, back over the Malaysian peninsula. This points to deliberate intent by whoever was flying the plane. And a further announcement from Prime Minister Razak seems to confirm this.
We can say with a high degree of certainty that the aircraft communications, addressing and reporting system was disabled.
Like other planes, this flight was fitted with what's known as ACARS, Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System. It allows the computers on the plane to relay to computers on the ground all kinds of ongoing technical information about the condition of the plane. The ACARS system was turned off. And this doesn't just involve a switch in the cockpit. It requires someone with technical knowledge to remove circuit breakers. Suddenly, mechanical failure is looking less plausible. But, to add to the confusion, as this news breaks, there is a flurry of speculation on the internet about there having been cracks reported in the fuselage of the aircraft.
There have been some recent airworthiness directives, which are safety directives made by the regulators in America, that refer to the fuselage of the Boeing 777, and in particular to the structural integrity to a certain part.
These cracks were reported at the crown of the fuselage, near the plane's air.
and 2 international air traffic control service providers over an ocean. This can give you, say, 15 minutes to make good your escape before anybody even starts to question whether you've actually gone missing at that point in time. The aircraft is then flown along the borderline between Malaysia and its northern border, which again indicates that perhaps the pilot or somebody with a lot of flight technical knowledge and air traffic control knowledge understands how to hide this aeroplane. And then it's alleged at the moment that the aeroplane is flying at 29,500 feet, which is quite often used as a borderline between 2 vertical segments of air traffic control. So effectively it's threading its way between 4 boxes that are stacked together exactly down the middle line, so that everybody will assume it's somebody else's problem.
If the plane continued out into the Indian Ocean, it could then have been brought down deliberately. But if it has crashed, shouldn't it be possible to locate it because of the signals from its black box?
To find it, if it's gone underwater, one of the things that you would use is this beacon here, which emits a signal for at least 30 days. You have to have some idea of where the accident site is. So depending on things like the depth of the water, temperature of the water, you may be able to pick this up from only about 5 miles away. But we're talking about a large area of sea here, and if you try and send down perhaps a remote operated vehicle, a mini submarine, try and find it, you have to have a pretty good idea where you're looking, or you have to be very lucky.
This is why it took 2 years to uncover the black box of Air France 447. But now, the Wall Street Journal story about the satellite ping comes into play.
It's about once every hour the satellite just sends a message to say, "Hi, are you still there?" And the aircraft will reply, "Yes, I'm still here." And that's how the authorities in the region have been able to confirm that the aircraft was still transmitting these signals for up to about 7 hours after the last transmission.
This information cannot pinpoint the plane, but it gives the angle of the plane in relation to the satellite. Investigators are now able to place the aircraft in one of 2 corridors. A northern corridor going from Thailand towards Kazakhstan, and a southern one leading out into the Indian Ocean. At this point, search efforts in the South China Sea are wound down.
If it had gone up the northerly corridor, the chances are that the amount of military radars in that area would have detected the aircraft.
It may have been seen by the military, who say, well, it's just an airliner at 30,000 feet. What's the problem? The Civil Air Traffic Control Authority should be talking to it. The Civil Air Traffic Control Authority might think, well, it's a military aeroplane, or indeed not detected if they don't have primary radar display shown. So it's quite possible to progress through some of these countries without actually alerting suspicion.
Day 9. The number of countries involved in the search has expanded from 14 to 25. The 2 air corridors encompass a vast area. And as the search area expands, reasons for the plane's disappearance remain just as obscure.
It's not just going on a murder hunt without the body. It's actually trying to find the weapon before you know there's been a murder.
By now, all crew members and all passengers are under investigation. Was there anyone on that plane with psychological problems? Hijacking and sabotage remain on the table, but inevitably, the spotlight falls on the pilot and the co-pilot. Do they hold the key to the secret of flight MH370? And then, some dramatic news from Australia. Day 10, and in one of the biggest searches in aviation history, a major development. A potentially important sighting of 2 objects is picked up by satellite 1,500 miles off the southwest coast of Perth, Australia.
It's very close to the predicted southern flight corridor, and that, I suppose, reinforces our suspicion that just maybe this is the first tangible evidence that we've got.
But this proves to be yet another false lead. However, the Malaysian authorities do confirm the plane's tracking devices and communication systems had been deliberately disabled. The investigation shifts back to the pilots. The last CCTV images of the captain and co-pilot as they pass through airport security before boarding flight MH370.
The investigators will be calling on specialist psychologists to undertake this type of work, who both understand the local culture as well as the psychological implications. So a lot of background data gathering will be going on, lots of people will be being interviewed, and they obviously want to focus on those with technical knowledge or those who've been picking up technical knowledge over the last few months.
A veteran pilot, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, joined Malaysia Airlines in 1981. Married with 3 grown-up children, he was renowned for his professionalism.
He was one of the original 777 fleet captains. You know, he's a great guy, you know, just a great pilot. You know, I think it attests to his experience. It was 18,000 hours of flying, great career.
This is a YouTube video that I made as a community service.
An aviation fanatic, he had even built a flight simulator in his home which mirrored the setup of the Boeing 777 he was piloting. This quickly caught the attention of the Malaysian authorities.
We took possession of a simulator, of a flight simulator, and we have dismantled it from the home, and we have assembled it at our office, and we are getting experts to look at it now.
Have him check and fix the leakage.
It's revealed that data on that simulator had been deleted before the captain took control of the flight. The pilot's political beliefs are also under scrutiny. It is revealed he was a public supporter of Malaysian opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim, who was given a jail sentence just hours before the plane disappeared.
Perhaps they have a theory that, you know, he was very, very depressed and therefore he caused the aircraft to crash. That might be one theory. And so they might be trying to ascertain, was he really depressed at the time, and what would be reasons that would be causing him to want to take his life.
The state of mind of the co-pilot is also being investigated. Doubt was cast on his character when it was revealed that he had broken flight rules by inviting 2 women into the cockpit during a flight in 2011.
The areas that are going to be looked at is the sort of almost the roguish nature of the first officer that's being portrayed in the press in terms of, you know, his affairs with girls and things like that. But I think that will turn out just to be a young man you know, with normal desires.
On Monday, March 17th, 2014, there is further news about the co-pilot.
Initial investigation indicated it was the co-pilot who basically spoke the last time it was recorded on tape.
But his reported cockpit sign-off, "All right, good night," was not the recognized air drill and raised suspicions.
The goodbye by the co-pilot was an unusually casual one. There was no use of the aircraft's own call sign. Even if you were going to use the word good night, you'd follow it up with your call sign so that the air traffic controllers know who's saying good night.
Weeks later, Malaysian officials revealed they had not actually confirmed who delivered the final sign-off, and the precise words used were, "Good night, Malaysian 370. Could the pilots have committed suicide? There is no indication they did, but pilot suicide is not unheard of. In 1997, a Silk Air flight crashed in Indonesia, killing 104 people. While US investigators said the pilot probably crashed the jet deliberately, an Indonesian investigation totally rejected the suicide theory. Two years later, in 1999, 217 people died when an Egypt Air flight from New York crashed in the Atlantic. Again, US investigators concluded pilot suicide, but the Egyptian authorities totally disagreed.
The physical evidence that was available to the investigators included the fact that there was only one pilot's DNA on the flight deck. The flight deck door was locked at the time of the accident. The other pilot's DNA was on the far side of the cockpit door, as was the fire axe.
But did the pilots commandeer the plane with evil intent, or were they undertaking a desperate effort to preserve the lives of the passengers on board?
Has something affected them in some way? And therefore this was not actually malign intent. You know, do we know it's malign intent? No, we don't.
With his character and what we knew of him, it just wouldn't make any sense that he would have anything to do with any sort of deliberate action on his part.
As the mystery of where MH370 vanished grows deeper, the question why did it happen grows more urgent.
It is really important, not just to the people, the families of the people who are on board, but to the whole world who travel by air and want assurance of the best possible safety, that we find out what happened. So I don't think the world can afford not to keep looking.
There are a number of highly improbable theories. It was shot out of the sky by mistake. It was hijacked and hidden on an island. There's even who claims it's been vaporized by a new superweapon. Experts believe it was either deliberate or there was a systems failure.
From my experience and as a pilot, I prefer the conventional explanation, which is where the aircraft has a problem, there is a fire, the crew and the pilots try to do their best to deal with a very difficult situation, but unfortunately they're not able to.
I believe at that stage there was some form of catastrophic failure on the aeroplane, either a decompression or perhaps an electrical fire which incapacitated the flight crew. I think the flight crew probably made a valiant effort to get the aeroplane onto a new course to safety.
The conventional theory about some form of electrical fire on board, either because of the cargo or because of a problem with the wiring, could explain in part why you have partial shutdown of some of the electrical systems. I prefer my pilots to be heroes because 99% of the time they try to do the very best for themselves and for their passengers.
A year on, and what impact is flight MH370 going to have on future flight safety?
Because of the disappearance of MH370, we now need two things. The first thing is live aircraft tracking data. The second thing is live streaming black box safety type data. And there is technology to deliver both of those points here and now. There was technology a year ago.
Missing for a year, flight MH370 has become one of the biggest aviation mysteries of all time. Where is it? What happened? We are no closer to the truth. For the airline industry, a setback to its reputation for safety. For the families of those presumed to have died, a clear answer is as far off as ever. And 1 year on, their continued waiting for a final explanation has become almost unbearable.